It had been 24 hours since I walked out of that restaurant, heels echoing against the marble floor, mascara bleeding under my eyes, birthday cake untouched, laughter still ringing in my ears. Only it wasn't laughter with me. It was at me. My name is Elaine Harper. I'm 42 years old, and yesterday was my birthday. My husband, Greg, thought it would be a brilliant idea to throw a celebration, only to publicly humiliate me in front of everyone I've ever known. His colleagues, our friends, my daughter's teachers. It wasn't just cruel. It was surgical. Now I'm standing barefoot in my mother's old kitchen, wrapped in a robe that smells faintly of lavender and loss, with a cigarette burning between my fingers. I don't smoke. Not usually. Only in moments like this, when the world has twisted so violently that I need something, anything, to ground me. The window's open. The August air is thick with heat and distant waves. Charleston sleeps. But inside me, everything is burning. I stared into the night sky, whispering to no one, "How did I let it get this far?" My mother died 7 years ago, but sometimes I still talk to her, or maybe accuse her. She was the one who taught me to stay quiet, to be a good wife, to never embarrass a man in public. Well, Greg didn't seem to care about that rule yesterday. He stood beside me in front of 70 people, raised his glass, and called me, word for word, a disaster in heels who can't even keep her own house clean. People laughed. Someone even clapped. I didn't cry. Not then. I smiled, nodded, sat down, waited for dessert to be served, then quietly left my own birthday dinner. Greg didn't follow me. He stayed, with his team, with Lorenza. Ah, yes, Lorenza, the dancer he claimed was just entertainment. Blonde, flexible, 26, and very comfortable in her own skin. She performed for the crowd like she belonged on that stage. She even blew Greg a kiss when she finished, and he didn't flinch, didn't even pretend to be embarrassed. That's when I knew. The rumors were true. The late nights, the new cologne, the gym sessions that never showed up in his body. He wasn't hiding anymore. He didn't need to, but I didn't run home. I didn't run anywhere. I drove to my mother's apartment, unlocked the door, stepped inside, and collapsed on the couch I hadn't sat on in years. The silence was thick, the kind of silence that only exists in a place where memory outweighs presence. Her ghost was here, and maybe in a strange way that made it the only place I could breathe. The cigarette burned down to the filter. I didn't even notice until it scorched my finger. God, Elaine, what are you doing? I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash every wine glass in that old cabinet. But instead, I stood there like a statue, numb, but aware of every drop of pain pooling inside me. I kept thinking he did this. Greg humiliated me, in front of everyone. For what? For show? For control? For Lorenza? And then another voice whispered. Or because someone told him something. Something he believes about you. I shook the thought away. Nonsense. Greg might be cruel, but he wasn't stupid. He knew me, or at least I thought he did. But something had shifted in him recently. Something poisonous. Like he was trying to punish me for something I hadn't done, or something I had. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at my reflection in the microwave door. My face looked older than I remembered. Tired. Hollow. But there was something else there, too. A flicker. A sharpness. Something I hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't just grief. It wasn't just shame. It was resolve. Because that night, in the wreckage of everything Greg tried to shatter, I remembered something I had buried for years. Something he couldn't take from me. A truth bigger than his cruelty. And his name was Noah. Greg wasn't always this way. There was a time, maybe long ago, maybe imagined, when he held my hand just because. When he used to leave notes in my lunch or bring home tulips after a hard week. We got married young, but not recklessly. He was charming, ambitious, and for a while I convinced myself I was lucky. I was Elaine, the woman behind the man. The quiet strength he introduced at networking events. The one who kept his shirts pressed and our daughter's field trip form signed. The one who smiled through dinners and didn't ask questions when he came home, late, smelling of bourbon and something floral. That's the problem with being dependable. People stop seeing you as human. You become a function, not a person. Greg loved control, not with fists, but with words, with silence, with carefully timed indifference. He never yelled. He didn't have to. A well-placed sigh, a pointed glance at a dust-speckled shelf, a joke at my expense in front of his colleagues. That's how he chipped away at me, day by day, year by year, until I stopped recognizing my own voice. But I stayed. For Rachel mostly. Our daughter. She's in college now, smart, kind, everything I ever hoped she'd be. I didn't want her to grow up in a broken home. So instead, I let the home break me. Still, I tried. I hosted the dinners, sent the Christmas cards, laughed when I needed to, bit my tongue when I didn't. And when Greg flirted too openly with waitresses or commented on how other women take care of themselves, I just looked away. That's what good wives do, right? They endure. They don't make scenes. But I wonder, when did enduring turn into erasure? Because last night wasn't an isolated moment. It was the culmination of years of dismissal, dressed up as devotion. The way he'd pat my hand in public, then ignore me in private. The way he called me babe around his boss, but nobody when I needed his help at home. The way he smiled for photos, but never looked at me with love anymore. I think the first crack came months ago, when a strange letter arrived at our house. It was addressed to Greg. No return address. Inside, 3 typed pages and a single photograph. The note claimed I was having an affair, detailed where I supposedly went, who I met, what hotel, even what time, and at the center of it all, a name, Noah Hartley. Greg never showed me the letter. I only found out later, through Melissa. But I remember that week vividly. He grew colder, distant. His compliments stopped. His sarcasm sharpened. One night he asked me, out of nowhere, if I believed people could change. I told him yes. He looked at me like I'd failed a test. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that Noah wasn't my lover. He was the ghost I'd never dared to speak aloud. The name I only whispered when I couldn't sleep. The face I imagined every birthday, every Mother's Day, every time I saw a boy with sandy hair and kind eyes. Noah was mine, and I had given him away. It was decades ago. I was 15. Michael lived in the unit next to ours, and we'd been inseparable since we were kids. We loved each other in that messy, innocent, too much too soon way teenagers do. When I got pregnant, I told him first. He wanted to run, to fix it, to marry me maybe. But our parents? They had other plans. Mine said I'd ruin my future. His were no better. They sent him to live with his grandmother out of state. My mother dragged me to a clinic, filled out forms I wasn't allowed to read, and made sure I never even held him. I still remember the hospital walls. Pale green, sterile. They wheeled him away before I could even see his face. They told me it was for the best, but I never believed that. That's why when Greg accused me, silently, cruelly, of betraying him, something inside me snapped. Not in anger, not in guilt, but in recognition, because the name he saw in that letter, Noah, wasn't a fabrication. He existed, and suddenly I had a terrible, aching suspicion that the past I had buried was about to claw its way into the light. The next morning, I didn't wake up, I surfaced, like someone who had been underwater too long and didn't realize they were drowning. My back ached from sleeping on that stiff old couch. My throat was dry, but my mind was crystal sharp. One name kept circling in my skull, like a siren, Noah. I hadn't spoken that name out loud in years. I made coffee without really thinking about it. The same way I used to when Rachel was in high school, and I had 30 minutes to pack her lunch, sign permission slips, and iron Greg's shirt before the sun even came up. Some habits stay, even after everything else falls apart. I sat at the kitchen table with the chipped corner, the one my mother always meant to fix. I stared at my phone. I had no missed calls from Greg. No texts. Nothing. Not even a "where are you?" He didn't care. And that truth didn't sting like it should have. It felt clarifying. Freeing almost. But just as I took my first sip of bitter coffee, there was a knock at the door. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just patient. I stood up slowly. My heart ticked faster with every step toward the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Melissa was at work. Rachel was on campus. No deliveries scheduled. I pressed my eye to the peephole and froze. A young man stood there. Mid-20s. Tall. Athletic build. Light brown hair tousled in a way that didn't look intentional. He held something in his hand, a small, worn envelope. I didn't recognize him. And yet, something in my gut twisted with a sharp, quiet recognition. I opened the door just a crack. "Yes?" I asked, more guarded than curious. The young man cleared his throat. "Are you Elaine Harper?" I nodded slowly. "Who's asking?" "My name is Noah. Noah Hartley. I think I'm your son." The world tilted. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My knees buckled. The floor rushed up too fast. And then darkness. When I came to, I was lying on the couch. The same one I had collapsed into the night before. A glass of water sat on the coffee table, and someone was kneeling beside me. Noah. He looked worried. Hands gentle. Eyes wide, like he was afraid to breathe too loudly. I tried to sit up, and he helped me without speaking. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to scare you. I shouldn't have come without warning." I stared at him, really stared this time. And it hit me, the way his jaw angled when he clenched it, the slight crease above his brow, the shape of his mouth. Michael. He looked just like Michael. How did you find me?" I whispered. "I've been looking for years," he said, voice steady. "Your name was redacted in the files. But I had clues. A nurse who remembered. A woman named Rose Hartley. She worked at the children's home I grew up in. She's the one who raised me." I blinked. "Hartley." She gave me her name, but I always knew I wasn't hers. She told me about the day I came to the home. How young the mother was. How scared. She never judged you. Neither did I. My throat tightened. I wanted to speak, but no words would come. My hand moved on its own, reaching out to touch his cheek. "You're real," I whispered. "You're really here." He nodded. We sat there in silence, our lives hanging in the air between us like dust in a sunbeam. "I didn't come to disrupt your life," he said after a while. "I just needed to see you. Once. That's all. If you never want to hear from me again, I'll leave." "No," I said too quickly. My voice cracked. "No. Don't go." I didn't know what I was feeling. Shock, joy, guilt, terror. But I knew this moment would change everything. And I wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. Melissa arrived 2 hours later with a bottle of rose and that look on her face, the one she used to wear whenever she thought I was about to make a terrible decision. Back in college, it was usually about men. Now apparently it was still about men and one boy who wasn't a boy anymore. "I'm sorry," I told her as she stepped inside, still in her work heels. I needed someone to tell me I'm not going insane. She raised an eyebrow. "I thought you were going to say you needed wine. But sure, I can do both." We sat at the kitchen table while Noah, my son, waited in the living room. I hadn't told Melissa everything yet. Just enough to make her drop her meetings and drive across town without questions. "So let me get this straight," she said, unscrewing the bottle with one hand and pouring into 2 mismatched mugs. "A man shows up at your door this morning, says he's your long-lost child from when you were 15, and you faint." "Yes." "And then let him in." I hesitated. "Yes." She shook her head. "Elaine, you watch Dateline. You know how these things end." "I know how this ended," I said, voice quiet. I saw his face, Mel. He looks exactly like Michael. That stopped her. She sipped slower now. Michael, you haven't said his name in years. I haven't allowed myself to. Melissa looked down into her mug, then back at me. Okay, let's say it's possible, but you need proof, not just resemblance, not just stories. I nodded. I'm thinking of doing a DNA test. At a private lab. Quiet, no legal mess. And if it's true? I looked past her, toward the living room where Noah was thumbing through the books on my shelf, not touching anything. Then I'll have to face everything I buried. Melissa reached across the table, her fingers wrapping around mine. I'll go with you. It wasn't until later that night, after Noah left with a promise to call the next morning, that I let myself cry. Not the polite kind of crying. Not the type where you dab the corners of your eyes and sniffle into a tissue. This was full-body grief, a tidal wave of every missed birthday. Every year I had imagined him somewhere in the world, and now he was here, 27 years old, standing in my house, and I didn't know how to be his mother. The next day, we drove to Federal Hill Medical Lab. Melissa insisted on staying close, her presence grounding me like a hand pressed against the center of my back. Noah met us there, holding a bouquet of white tulips. I hadn't told him they were my favorite. He just knew. The nurse called our names, and suddenly we were in a small room that smelled like antiseptic and nervous hope. Who are we testing for a familial relationship? The technician asked, pulling on gloves. I swallowed. Mother and son, I said. Noah sat beside me, calm. I tried to steady my hands, but they trembled slightly as the cotton swab touched the inside of my cheek. It was over in seconds, but my heart was still racing when the nurse said the results would be ready in 5 business days. 5 days. 5 days to imagine every possible outcome. On the way back, Noah asked if I wanted him to stay close. Maybe meet again in a week. No, I said, then caught myself. I want to, but I need time. Space to think. I understand, he said. Take what you need. But as he walked away, I felt that strange tearing again. Like I'd just sent something precious back into the dark. And this time I might never get it back. Greg called 3 days later. Not because he missed me. Not because he regretted anything. But because, apparently, Rachel had asked why I hadn't come home. And he hated looking like the bad guy. He opened with his usual sharpness. So, how long are you planning to keep playing victim? I was standing in my mother's backyard, barefoot on the old stone path she used to garden on, staring at a lemon tree that hadn't borne fruit in years. I didn't even flinch. Not playing, I said flatly. Just finally done pretending. He scoffed. Come on, Elaine. You stormed out of your own birthday dinner like a soap opera star. Do you have any idea how awkward that made me look? I laughed, but it wasn't amusement. It was the kind of laugh that comes from years of biting your tongue. You're worried about how you looked? There was silence, a beat too long. Then he said it, the thing he'd clearly been holding back. I know about Noah. My fingers stiffened around the phone. Excuse me. The letter, the name, the fact that you've been hiding some bastard child for decades. Do you think that makes you look noble, Elaine? You lied to me. You lied to Rachel. All these years. I sat down slowly on the edge of the planter box. The air was thick, humid, and I could feel something shift inside me. Not shame, not fear. Clarity. I didn't lie. I survived, I said. And what I did back then. I was a child, Greg. A terrified girl sent away by people who didn't think she had a choice. He snorted. So now what? You're going to play mother to a grown man you never raised? Bring him into our family like nothing happened. Our family. I repeated. You mean the one you embarrassed me in front of? The one you've chipped away at for 20 years while pretending to be the perfect husband? He didn't respond. So I continued. Here's the thing, Greg. I don't owe you an explanation. Not anymore. And I'm done letting you control what parts of me are acceptable. You can keep pretending you're the injured party. But you and I both know the only person you've ever really loved is yourself. The line went dead, and for the first time in years, I felt weightless. Later that night, I sat with Melissa on the back porch, candles flickering between us. She poured another glass of wine and didn't say anything for a while. Then she asked, "You think Rachel knows?" I shook my head. "Not yet, but she will. She deserves the truth." Melissa nodded. "And what about Michael?" That name, after all these years, it still struck like a match against my ribs. "I don't know," I said quietly. "I thought he was gone. I assumed he'd moved on, forgotten me. But now Noah's here, and there's no way he raised himself." The next morning, the call came. It was the lab. I held the phone like it might shatter. "Ms. Harper? We're calling to confirm the results of your familial relationship test with Mr. Noah Hartley. Based on the DNA samples provided, the probability of maternity is greater than 99.99%. I closed my eyes. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but this time they were quiet, cleansing. He was mine. No doubt. No question. Noah was my son. I told Rachel that evening. We met at a quiet cafe near the waterfront, the kind we used to go to after her ballet recitals when she was little. She ordered a peppermint tea and didn't touch it. I stirred my coffee, just to keep my hands busy. "There's something I need to tell you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, sensing the gravity in my tone. "Is it about Dad?" I hesitated. "No, not this time." Her brow furrowed slightly. "Then what?" I took a breath. "Before I met your father, long before, I had a child, a son." Rachel blinked. I watched the thought ripple through her face. Shock, confusion, something bordering on disbelief. "You mean, I have a brother?" I nodded. "His name is Noah. I was 15. It wasn't something I chose lightly. My parents, your grandparents, made the decision for me. I never even got to hold him." Rachel didn't speak for a moment. Then she asked, "Why now?" "Because he found me. He showed up at my door a few days ago, and he looks like everything I thought I'd never get to know. He's kind, respectful, and he didn't come to blame me. He came to understand." She leaned back, arms crossed, as if trying to wrap herself in some invisible shield. "Does Dad know?" "Yes," I said, "and he reacted exactly the way you'd expect." Rachel snorted softly. "So terribly." I gave a faint smile. "More or less." She tapped her nails against the ceramic cup. "I don't know what to say. I thought I knew you. And now there's this whole other piece of your life that you just never told me." "I wanted to," I said gently. "So many times. But I was afraid it would change the way you saw me. I didn't want to add weight to your life that wasn't yours to carry." Rachel looked at me, really looked, and for a moment I saw not a child but a woman who had her own heartbreaks, her own silences, her own boundaries. "Can I meet him?" she asked. It caught me off guard. "You want to?" She nodded. "He's my brother, whether it's awkward or not, whether it makes sense or not. He's here, and if he wants to be part of your life, then he's part of mine too." Something in my chest cracked open. I reached across the table, took her hand, and squeezed. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means more than you know." She shrugged, but I saw the emotion welling behind her eyes. "Besides," she said, "maybe I always wanted a sibling. Someone who might actually text me back." We both laughed, and just like that, the air between us felt lighter. 2 days later, we arranged the meeting. At Melissa's house, neutral ground. When Noah walked in, Rachel stood up, unsure of what to do. He paused, then extended a hand. She ignored it and hugged him. Not a polite hug, a real one. The kind that says, "I don't know you yet, but I'm open." That evening, the three of us sat on Melissa's porch, under string lights and cicadas. Noah told us about his childhood, about Rose, the woman who raised him, about his job as a trauma nurse in Napa. about his love of old records and why he hated tomatoes. Rachel told him about her debate team, her roommate's weird cat, how she once dyed her hair blue just to spite a boy. I sat there quietly listening, watching, and for the first time in decades, I felt like a mother again. Not just to the daughter I had raised, but to the son I had once lost. Greg didn't take it well when he found out Rachel had met Noah. He called me at 11 p.m., his voice low but sharp, like a blade pressed just beneath the skin. "So now you're dragging her into this mess?" "She asked to meet him," I replied calmly. "She's an adult, Greg. She can decide for herself." "You don't see it, do you?" he hissed. "You're destroying everything. Our family, our reputation. There is no family, Greg." I cut in, my voice cold now. "You destroyed that the night you stood up in front of our friends and turned me into a joke." Silence, then a bitter laugh. "You're so dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm just finally done pretending your abuse was cleverness." I hung up before he could respond. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. But there was also something else, a quiet, steady strength returning to my spine. Melissa stayed over that night. She brought a bag of chips and 2 bottles of wine and told me we were going to watch terrible movies until the world made sense again. Somewhere between the second glass and a rom-com from the 90s, she asked, "Are you ever going to tell Michael?" I paused. Michael, the boy who had once promised to run away with me. The boy who'd pressed trembling hands against my stomach and whispered that he'd be a better father than his own. The boy I never saw again after that long, final summer. "I wouldn't even know where to start," I admitted. "I don't even know if he's still in the state." "Well," she said, passing me her phone, "Noah might." It hadn't occurred to me, but of course, if Noah had searched for me, chances were he'd searched for Michael too. The next morning, I asked him. We met at a park halfway between our homes. It was still early, dew fresh on the grass, the world not fully awake. He looked nervous when I brought it up. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you," he said. "I didn't want to overwhelm you." "You could never overwhelm me," I said gently. He smiled, then handed me a folded piece of paper. "I think this is him. Michael Evans. Lives in Sonoma. Teaches high school history. Married once, no kids. Divorced 3 years ago." I traced the name with my finger. It didn't feel real. It felt like touching a memory that somehow survived all these years. "Do you want to reach out?" Noah asked. "I don't know," I whispered, "but I think I have to." That night, I sat down at my desk, pulled out a clean sheet of paper, and began writing the hardest letter of my life. "Dear Michael, you probably never expected to hear from me again. It took 3 drafts, for tries to seal the envelope, 2 days to actually drop it in the mailbox, and then waiting. A week passed, then 2. No answer. Part of me accepted it. Maybe he didn't want to reopen old wounds. Maybe his life was peaceful now, and I was just a ghost from a painful chapter. But then, on a quiet Thursday morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Elaine," the voice asked. I hadn't heard it in almost 3 decades, but I knew it immediately. "Michael." His voice hadn't changed. It was a little older, a little heavier, but underneath it was still him. The same boy who once carved our initials into the old sycamore tree behind the school gym. The same voice that used to whisper promises in the dark when the world felt like it was pressing down on both of us. "I almost didn't call," he admitted after a long pause. "I read your letter a dozen times before I believed it was real." "I almost didn't send it," I whispered. "But then I thought you deserved to know." There was silence on the line, but it wasn't heavy. It was full of breath and memory. "I thought about you for years, Elaine. Every birthday, every summer. I used to wonder if you'd ever forgiven me." I sat down slowly, the phone cradled to my ear like it was holding more than sound, like it was holding a lifetime. "There was nothing to forgive," I said. "We were children. We didn't have a say." He exhaled sharply. "And Noah?" "He found me. A few weeks ago. He's amazing, Michael. You'd be proud. I already am, he said, and I heard his voice catch. We spoke for over an hour. About our lives, our scars, the paths that curved so far from where we started. He told me about his divorce, about the years he spent wondering if something was missing from his life and not knowing what, about how he'd always imagined me on the West Coast somewhere, building a life far from everything we knew. When we finally hung up, I sat in the stillness of the room, tears running down my cheeks, but this time not from grief. It was release. The next few days passed in a blur. Rachel asked if she could meet Michael. Melissa nearly screamed when I told her he'd agreed to visit. And Noah, well, he was quiet, thoughtful. He didn't say much, but I could tell it meant something to him, that he'd brought two broken pieces back together. On Sunday, we met at a small inn in Glen Ellen, tucked between vineyards and wild lavender. I saw him through the window first, Michael, standing by the door, holding a bouquet of marigolds. He looked older, yes, but not in a way that diminished him, in a way that said he'd lived. When he saw me, he smiled, and just like that, 30 years folded in on themselves. We didn't run into each other's arms. We didn't cry out or make a scene. We just walked, slowly, deliberately, until we were standing face to face. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I replied. He reached out and touched my hand. Not a grab, just a brush, as if to ask, "Is this real?" I nodded. Then Noah stepped out from behind me. Michael turned to him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Michael said, "I never stopped wondering if you were out there." And Noah smiled, eyes bright. "I never stopped hoping you'd find me." They embraced, and I felt something shift inside me, something deep and old and wounded, slowly beginning to heal. We sat together for hours that day, under the shade of an old oak tree behind the inn. Rachel joined us later, and for the first time in my adult life, I looked around and saw a family that wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was ours. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. No one suddenly forgot the decades we'd missed. There were still awkward pauses, questions that hovered in the air like unspoken ghosts. But something had shifted. We were all trying. That mattered. Greg, on the other hand, wasn't handling the silence well. He showed up uninvited one evening. Melissa was over, helping me sort old photo albums. Rachel was upstairs on a call, and I was barefoot, holding a mug of tea when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw him standing there, creased suit, jaw set, eyes sharp. "You weren't returning my messages," he said, stepping in like he still had a right to. "I wasn't planning to," I replied. He glanced around. "Where's Rachel?" "Upstairs." He nodded, then lowered his voice. "I don't think you understand what you're doing. This fantasy family reunion, it's reckless. It's going to confuse her." "She's not confused," I said. "She's just not blind anymore." He flinched. "You really think you can rewrite the past?" he hissed. "That you can just slot this grown man into our lives and expect everything to make sense?" I stared at him, calm. "I'm not rewriting anything. I'm telling the truth. For the first time in years." He scoffed. "Oh, so you're the hero now? After lying to me for our entire marriage?" I stepped closer. "You don't get to talk about betrayal, Greg. Not after what you did to me. Not after how many times you humiliated me behind closed doors and called it just being honest. You don't get to weaponize my pain while pretending yours is righteous." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "You lost control, Greg," I said, softer now. "That's what's eating you. Not Noah. Not Michael. Not even me. You just don't know who you are when no one's afraid of you anymore." I stepped back and opened the door. "You need to leave." He looked at me, jaw tight, fists clenched like a man who'd just lost a game he didn't know he was playing. "I'll fight you in court," he warned. "You think you can take the house, the assets, our name," I smiled. "Greg, you can have the house. I'm building something far better." He didn't move. So Rachel came downstairs. "Dad," she said, voice quiet but firm, "you should go." He turned, eyes wide. "Rachel, don't. Go," she repeated. "We're done watching you tear her down." He didn't argue after that. The door shut behind him like the final note of a long, dissonant song. Melissa exhaled. Damn. I laughed, though my hands were trembling, slightly. I didn't think I had that in me. She wrapped an arm around my shoulders. You always did. You just forgot. Later that night, I stood on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, looking up at the stars. The sky was clear, the kind of dark that feels honest. I thought about everything that had led me here, the mistakes, the losses, the silence, and now the light peeking through all that wreckage. I wasn't whole yet, but I was healing, and for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't alone. 6 months later, everything looked different. The house was no longer Greg's. I sold it, quietly and cleanly without fanfare. I didn't even pack everything, just the things that mattered. A few books, some old photographs, Rachel's childhood drawings. The rest I left behind like shed skin. Rachel chose to move with me, not because she had to, because she wanted to. We found a small craftsman-style home near the coast, close to where the salt air hits your skin before you even see the water. Melissa helped decorate. Noah installed the porch swing himself. Michael sent a box of vintage history books with a note tucked inside that simply said, "For when you're ready to start again." He didn't rush me. He never did. But he came to visit. And when he saw me holding our son's hand at a farmer's market in Charleston, sunlight catching in both their hair, I saw the ache in his eyes soften, turn into something gentler, something steady. There was no grand reconciliation, no wedding redo, just dinners, long walks, shared silences. Slowly, a rhythm began to return. Rachel thrived. She started teaching part-time at a local college, mentoring young women in communications. She said she wanted to help them find their voice before it took them decades, like it did me. Noah visited often, sometimes with Rose, his adoptive mother, now a part of my story in ways I never imagined. She was kind, gracious, and full of warmth. She called me Elaine at first, then one day said, "I see why he came looking for you." And I cried in the middle of a grocery aisle. One day, I stood on the porch watching the sun sink into the ocean, and Rachel joined me, a glass of lemonade in her hand. "You're different now," she said. "How so?" I asked. She tilted her head. "You laugh more, but you also cry easier, and you don't apologize for either." I smiled. That's what healing looks like. We were quiet a moment. Then she asked, "Do you regret it? Keeping Noah a secret?" I thought about it, about all the years of silence, the pain, the shame, the unanswered questions. "I regret the fear," I said, "but not the love. Never the love." She nodded. "That's fair." The wind picked up, soft and warm, brushing against our skin like a promise. A week later, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address, just a single line, "You were never alone. You just didn't know how many people were waiting for you to come back to yourself." I didn't need to know who sent it. I felt it, because they were right. For years, I thought my story ended the day I gave birth behind closed doors, then walked away empty. But it turns out that was only the beginning. Sometimes the deepest scars aren't the ones left by others, but the ones we carry in silence, out of fear, out of shame, out of love. But silence doesn't protect us. It only buries the truth deeper. And the truth always finds its way back. What I've learned is this. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what hurt you. It's about freeing yourself from who you were when it did. You are allowed to begin again, no matter how late, no matter how broken.